Thank you so much. My name is Jazib Zahir, and as I've been introduced, I work in the software tech industry, and I have a lot of interest in edtech in general. I'm moderating this panel on behalf of Beacon House, which is focusing on the metaverse and its impact on the economy. And it's really exciting to be here as part of this initiative and to get a chance to introduce you to so many amazing speakers whose work is relevant to the metaverse. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite the panelists onto the stage. I'd like to mention their names, a little bit about them as they come up to the stage. We have Mr. Farid Haque, who is going to be joining us virtually. We have Ms. Moneeza Butt. We have Mr. Tayseer Ali. We have Mr. Furquan Kidwai. And we have a student here, Mr. Chen Ziyang. So I'd love to invite them all to stage. Please come and join us. The exciting thing about this panel is we have people from all backgrounds and all walks of life. We have entrepreneurs, we have investors, we have students, we have people who have really worked through the entire value chain of industry. And that's why they're here to be able to share such exciting perspectives with us in related to the metaverse. So let me give you a brief introduction to everyone involved. Mr. Farid Haque is joining us virtually from London. Mr. Farid Haque has really worked in every segment of industry. He's been an engineer, he's been a consultant, he is now working as an investor, and he's working as a deep tech investor with the firm Intima.ai, and we're really excited about how he brings that perspective of someone in industry and investment and how it impacts the metaverse. We have with us Ms. Moneeza Butt. She is a partner in KPMG Pakistan, which you all must recognize as one of the leading accounting and management consulting firms. She is the first lady partner in such a firm in Pakistan, and she's very deeply involved in improving diversity in industry and getting more women involved in such professions. I also have with me Mr. Tayseer Ali. Mr. Tayseer Ali also brings a fascinating background to the mix. He is the CFO of SadaPay, which many of you will recognize as one of the leading fintech firms in Pakistan. They have amazing partnerships with companies like MasterCard and are involved in some very cutting-edge fintech work. He's a chartered accountant by training, and he is kind of one of the revolutionary people in startups in general and fintech in particular. And he also has a lot of exposure to working in all forms of consulting and finance, both in Pakistan and abroad. Next, I have Mr. Furquan Kidwai. Mr. Furquan Kidwai also brings to us a very strong academic and industrial background. He is currently founder and CEO of Kidwai. And Kidwai, again, you'll recognize Kidwai.pk as one of the cutting-edge startups in Pakistan which deals in digital health. And he's particularly involved in making sure that all forms of medicine are provided in a convenient and affordable way to Pakistanis online. And he's worked pretty much all over the world, in the US, in the UK, in all kinds of financial, technical, managerial roles. And he's also been involved in the board at Imperial College. And he studied engineering, international relations, and applied mathematics at different stages in the United Kingdom. And finally, we have a student of our own from Beacon House, Chen Ziyang. He is currently a student in the IB DP program, TNS Beacon House. He is taking science subjects, also very interested in economics, and is very interested in a related future career. He's very active in Model UN, and we're really excited to see what perspective he brings as a student who is thinking about the implications of the metaverse for what he does. One final thing I really want to emphasize about our panelists is their connection with Beacon House. Both Tayseer and Furquan are alums of Beacon House at different stages, and Chen is a current student. With that, let me switch to our current topic, and let's get down to talking about the metaverse. The metaverse is one of the emerging concepts in the technical world. Everybody's talking about it. People have lots of different interpretations of what really it is. but everyone's excited about what it can achieve. So people are thinking about it from the perspective of entrepreneurs, from the perspective of investors. There's a lot to discuss, there's a lot to unpack, there's a lot to parse. And the reason we're having this session is so we can bring you lots of disparate perspectives on what it is and why it should matter. And what we're hoping is that you come away from this session with an enhanced understanding of what the metaverse can be and how you might get involved. So without further ado, I want to start passing things on to our panelists. And I think the first question I'm going to throw at all of them really is, what does the metaverse mean to you? How do you interpret it? What's exciting about it? Once we see the 5 different perspectives on it, I think we'll all start to understand how complex and exciting it is. So I'll give the first chance to Mr. Farid. We'd love to hear from you virtually on how you interpret the metaverse and why you're excited about the metaverse. Go ahead, Mr. Farid.
So assalamu alaikum, everyone. I think just in brief, I just want to share with you my understanding of the metaverse. And I've actually been in it for a terribly long time. And I think that it's only now becoming something that is far more popular. And I say I've been in it, but I've been in a particular version of it. And the version I'm going to tell you about is a closed version of the metaverse. So there's many different types of metaverses. I'm sure that some of the other panelists will talk about their definitions. But for me, the metaverse is really what I would describe as a persistent, shared, virtual environment where with its own economy and identity systems that allow for a shared experience. So I'll stop with that as a definition. And if I can go back to what I said earlier around being in it for a long time, there's one particular closed metaverse called Roblox, which, Roblox is a gaming system. And often many things start as a gaming use case. I know certainly a lot of great AI research has come off of gaming use cases, but that's been going for many, many years, over a decade. They hit 100 million users back in 2019. So that's the one where I've had the most experience of actually being in for the longest time. And I'm really looking forward to hearing other people's experiences with the metaverses they've been involved with. So I'll pass it back over to you guys.
Perfect, thank you so much. Now I'd like to give the same opportunity to Ms. Moneeza to share with her thoughts about the metaverse.
Yes, Jazib, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I must congratulate the organizers for organizing such a fabulous conference. Coming to your question about the metaverse, you know, Jazib, I feel for Facebook to change its name to Meta, it's very symbolic about what one of the tech companies is thinking about the future of digital interactions. So that speaks volumes itself. And there's a lot of talk about the metaverse, though I feel the concept is not so full-fledged, you know, it's not so developed as yet. And the talk is, I think, because the physical world and the online world and the demarcation lines are blurring every day. We feel that the demarcation between the two worlds is blurring and it's getting like diminishing. So naturally, because of that, people are very excited. They want to know more about the metaverse. I feel it is like a future digital internet that we all are going to be in. It's going to be a parallel, I would say, universe as compared to where we are physically, stationed. So, that is what my view is. I'd pass it on to the other panelists now.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to give the same opportunity to Tayseer.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm really grateful that I'm here. Naturally, I've been connected to Beacon House for a very long time of my life. So in terms of metaverse, for me, metaverse is just another augmentation of human experience, which will eventually have its own economy. It already has its own sort of a world within itself. And for example, one of the key examples that I just thought of when I walked in was the virtual experience that it adds to a human life. The key example that I'm going to take is my wife's example, because she is here in the audience. She wasn't planning on attending this conference, but she did once she knew that Jeffrey Archer is going to be joining us virtually. Now, I can only imagine her happiness if Jeffrey Archer was to join maybe in a hologram phase, or she can sometime, interact with avatars of her favorite writers. So for me, it's just an augmentation of the human experience, and as Farid said, it will eventually have its own ecosystem, it will have its own economy, and that's where, from my side, financial services comes into play. And that's from my aspect, there's a business opportunity that can be tapped into. Pakistan is positioned in where Pakistan can actually take a lot of advantage of developing itself to report to or sort of serve that metaverse requirements in the future. So that's what my thoughts are.
Thank you so much, Tayseer. Now I'd like to hear the same from Furquan.
Thank you. So I think it's a very interesting question. I frankly did not think about it until I came here. My understanding of metaverse, in my opinion, I think it's more about increasingly making the duality between the physical and digital world more murky. I think that's what it is. Right now, someone is online doing something online, right? The other one, no, I'm playing with my friends offline, right? That's it. There's two complete different, distinct worlds. I think going forward with all the technologies involved, be it virtual reality, augmented reality, and whatnot, can actually that line between the two be murky? Can my kids playing football in a backyard have the cousins join in from Australia and play together? I think that is where the world is heading. I don't know how, when, if is going to evolve, but one thing is certain: when in 1993, when internet started, there's a Newsweek article which basically said that it's too far out. It's actually not something worth considering, right? So I think that's where, if we take something from that learning, I think this will increasingly become a reality, which may not sound too closer to home at the moment. That's my understanding.
Thank you so much, Furquan. And I'd like to hear from Chen now.
Thank you, Mr. Jazib. For me, as my perspective, I do feel that Metaverse is a product that comes out from the natural evolution of internet. Just as how we see that the laptop started to evolve to the mobile, and we do also feel that the Metaverse is actually a product of the natural evolution of the internet. And so by the nature of the internet, it's actually something that will get very closely to our life in the near future. And yeah, that's my perspective.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chen, and everyone. So we've heard about Roblox, we've heard about Meta, we've heard about specific use cases, we've heard about duality, augmentation. Your first thought is probably that there's a lot of complexity here, and let's try to unpack that over the next 30 to 45 minutes. So we're going to go into some more precise questions, and we're going to get a chance to hear from multiple people on the panel for each question. So the first question I'm really going to go into at this point is, let's think from the perspective of an investor. The investor is looking for those best, biggest opportunities. But the investors always have some form of investment thesis. They're trying to figure out what is the best opportunity, why should I invest in this company? And I want to ask Farid, from that perspective, he's been an investor, he's looked at lots of different industries. Is he excited about the metaverse from an investor perspective? And if so, how does he look at companies from an investment perspective? Is it very similar to the way he looks at other industries, or has he brought a fresh new perspective into how to invest in the metaverse? So over to you, Farid.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. I think even though I said that the metaverse has been around for a long time, and I'm going to give one other example before I go into the investor perspective. I don't know how many of you have heard of a company called Second Life. Is that something that people may have heard of? Second Life is something that's been around for a very long time also. It was created by a company called Linden Lab, and this is as far back as like 2003. They came up with, again, a virtual immersive world where people could have avatars, and then, much like Furquan said, blurred the lines between real-time physical and digital interaction. So I remember I used to work for a company called Accenture. Many of you may have heard of it. And back in the day, we used to do some recruiting for very specific technologists in Second Life, because we found that a lot of them existed there. So there was a very clear use case for HR to say, okay, as a company, let's go in there, let's interact with those people, and let's try and see whether they are a good fit for the culture of the company and what they want to achieve. Now, I'm giving you that example as sort of a prelude to what I'm about to talk about, which is use cases. And often investors have, there are many different kinds of investors. There are generalist investors and there are specialist investors. There are investors with a thematic focus. So as an example, there might be some that say, I only invest in the metaverse and I don't do anything else. And there are also people that have a thesis-driven approach to specific investment areas. So, for example, somebody may say, I believe that machine learning is the future, and therefore I'm going to invest very heavily into machine learning startups. Now, and then finally, there's also a regional perspective for investors, where some investors may be investing all over the world. Others may be investing only in, let's say, Pakistan. So you may have some local VC funds that are investing just there. And the last thing I would say, just in terms of getting us all on the same page, is that you also have various different kinds of VCs. So when you say venture capital, it's not all venture capital firms are set up the same way, and nor do they come with the same background. So for example, you can have a CVC, which is a corporate venture capital unit, or you could have a commercial private VC, which is not linked to in any way, shape, or form to any corporation. I think it's helpful to just understand that there is a myriad of perspectives, backgrounds, players, and structures available in the market. Now, what all of them are looking for, at least in venture capital, is huge returns. Venture capital is a portfolio game. And often what you're looking to do is you're looking to invest in a portfolio of companies. And in that portfolio, some of those companies will hopefully return the fund and then some. What does that mean? That could mean, and this is just hypothetical and theoretical, but if you have 100 companies, that means that maybe, let's say, for example, 70 of them don't have such great outcomes. Another, let's say 20 of them have mediocre outcomes. And in venture, even a 2-3 times could be a mediocre outcome. And then finally, a few of them, a small handful, have tremendous outcomes, which if your fund was 100 million and you returned, let's say, a billion, that is a fantastic return. So that's just giving you, again, some commercial perspective on VCs are not looking for lifestyle businesses. They're looking for outlier businesses that can return huge sums of money back to the fund, which then gives the money back to LPs, which are limited partners, people that invest in the funds. Now, coming specifically to the metaverse, it's very interesting because when you look at the metaverse, you can't invest in it as an amorphous blob, right? So you kind of have to look at, again, what particular components within the metaverse are you looking to invest in? So the first thing I said to you was that, hey, it's a shared, immersive, persistent virtual environment, probably 3D, and it has its own economy and identity systems, most likely. Now, if I go with that, and if I look at what our colleague from Sadape just mentioned as well around, let's say, payments, I personally think there's a huge opportunity, right, for payments, because anybody who's going to interact in the virtual world and potentially pay for something has to use some sort of payment mechanism, payment system. And often, if you think about the metaverse today, one of the definitions certainly includes that open metaverses are decentralized. And what that means is they often involve some level of use of crypto. Now, I know that many countries still have some ambiguity around the use of crypto. So not to start a controversy over whether there should be crypto in Pakistan or not, et cetera. But I'm just going to assume for a second that people will have access to be able to buy something like ETH, which is off of Ethereum and could be underpinning some of the metaverses. Now, there might be lots of terms here that you don't understand, but the simple way of thinking about it is when you go into an arcade as a kid and you buy a whole bunch of tokens, and then you can use those tokens to put them into the game slots. Well, that's exactly what they're doing here, is that they're buying a particular kind of currency that can then be used within a particular system or environment. So payments is a really attractive space for a lot of people. That's one. The other one I'd love to share is, and these are, look, this is my perspective. I'm sure that lots of investors have, their own perspectives on what is interesting within the metaverse. I also think that there's the growing use of, and I'm sure, again, later on, people will talk about the different kinds of engines that exist within metaverse. One of them is a physics engine that actually allows things to behave like real world physics would. So for example, if you hit something, that thing would move. So similar to physics engines, you also have something now, which is new, called an AI engine. Now, why is an artificial intelligence engine important for the metaverse potentially? Because of something called NPCs, non-player characters. So if you're playing a game, now imagine, sure, you might be surrounded by lots of other real people, but the reality is most games also have NPCs, non-player characters that move around. Now, those players can be smart or dumb. The AI engines give them intelligence and allow them to be more interesting, probably retain users longer, make it more interesting. So, as an investor, I think a lot of us, especially in the deep tech space, who are AI investors, like our fund Intema is, we are very interested in the use of AI engines within the metaverse and a gaming context. And the final one I'll just leave you with is more about form factor, in my opinion. And we mentioned that it could be 3D. In fact, Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic Games, often uses the words to say it's a real-time 3D social media where people can create and engage in shared experiences. Now, if they are using 3D, then any technologies that enable that and make that more real suddenly become really interesting. I'll leave you with one last number. To date, at least these numbers are a little older, so I'm sure it's higher now. But by 2021, they had already had about close to $10.5 billion invested across metaverse gaming, augmented reality, and virtual worlds. So I hope that gives you a little flavor of what we look for, and I'll pass it back to the rest of the panel.
Thank you so much, Farid. I think your points about the engines and currencies were really useful in understanding what's going on in the metaverse. I'm going to switch over to Moneeza now, not just to build upon points that might have caught her attention from what Farid said, but I'd specifically like her to also think about, given this is a new industry, a nascent industry, are the regulators ready? Given her background in compliance, accounting, legal standards, does she feel like regulations exist for the metaverse? And if not, what regulations should exist? How are people with her background thinking about it? Would love to hear from you, Moneeza.
Yes, thank you, Jazib. So as I mentioned earlier, so there's no full-fledged metaverse as such, and there are no owners of the metaverse currently. And we have these tech companies who are providing portals and gateways to the metaverse. So we have these companies, for example, I read somewhere that Meta has invested around 10 billion in the metaverse, and we have like Walmart and some other company also, where they are protecting their trademarks for the virtual version of their products. Now, when we talk about these big companies, they're more geared towards their financial dominance in this new metaverse economy. But at the same time, this gives rise to issues like, these unchallenged monopoly practices will give rise to concentration of wealth, and it also gives them a first mover advantage, which would naturally affect the startups and the smaller companies, basically. So, we need to have some form of regulation at the inception so that it is like, an equitable ground for everybody and all the players to come in. Now, regulations for metaverse remain to be a challenge because naturally the concept is not so clear currently. And, we need to see how the government and the international organizations and as well as the private sector, they can set up a regulatory structure. But at the same time, I believe that the regulator basically has to be independent of the government, because there can be capital surveillism where you can have people making profit because of the data that they are privy to. So we need to see that also. And a very important aspect I feel is that the regulators or the policy makers need to have more understanding of technology. So we have these policymakers who are not so conversant with what the technology is all about today. So they need to have a more proactive approach to understand what are the aspirations of these technology companies, so that they can build in the regulations at the time when the idea is floated about, and at the inception stage only. So currently, I believe in the metaverse, we were talking about the non-fungible tokens. Since there is no regulation as such, so they are subjected to the traditional forms of financial, methodologies, the traditional regulations that they have for currencies, for banking and all. So for example, the non-fungible token, the value that it creates or when it is exchanged, so it basically characterizes an investment contract. So it comes under the purview of Securities Act and all. So, but that really needs to be remodeled to the metaverse economy, and that this is an area which regulators need to really look into and then have applicable policies in place. And another thing I think which I feel is that since The regulation is not evolving at the pace of technology, so there's a lack of supervision, which can be very concerning. Because, there is no real money that we're talking about in the metaverse. We're talking about like non-fungible tokens, we're talking about like the Fortnite has V-Bucks. So they may be stored in an account or in a wallet, online, but there is no government-backed protection for loss or for fraud. And even for the, like if you own a piece of land virtually in the virtual world, so that carries a value, but there are no policies for like refund, customer protection policies. These are all the areas where I believe that, the regulators need to just gear up and come into action.
Thank you so much, Moneeza. I think from you, we've understood that regulation in the metaverse is really a work in progress. And we need to figure out who owns what and how the different channels work and how banks need to contribute. I'd now like to give an opportunity to Tayseer. We've heard about some indications that financial transactions might be a very exciting opportunity in the metaverse. So I'd love to hear from him as someone who's innovating in fintech. Where are the opportunities in fintech in the metaverse? Where are the challenges? And where would you like to see things go? And where do you expect things to go? Go ahead, Tayseer.
Well, that's actually a very interesting question, and I hope I can cover all aspects of that question. Now, the thing is that let's start from the beginning what Metaverse actually is. And it's a collection of different worlds which is based around enhancing your digital experience. Now, Farid talked about Sandbox, which is basically this world that was developed around 20 years ago. And people do actually have virtual lives in that platform, and they are creating value. And when you say creating value, that automatically means that you should be able to transfer your value from one world to another world. If you have created an avatar in one world, you should be able to use that avatar in the other world. So that transfer of value then gives birth to financial services. Moneeza talked about NFTs, Farid touched about NFTs as well. That is also an exchange of value. And that value needs to be transacted through a mechanism. That's where fintechs have a big role to play. One of the key things about Metaverse is going to be how people will transact, and that is going to be the virtual currency that they have. For example, we know of this cryptocurrency. We have Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all other coins that are available. Fintechs right now, as Moneeza again mentioned, are somewhat bound by the lack of regulation around that. So as a result, they cannot really freely transact in that manner. But once the regulators around different geographical areas have figured out how to regulate that space, that's an automatic inroad for fintechs to get into the act on Metaverse. That's one of the key. Well, it's an opportunity and a challenge as well, because most of the fintechs would have to prepare themselves to get into that exchange mode. Other than that, as the value creation happens within the metaverse itself, for example, the gaming world, where the immersive gaming experience right now in 2021, people spend about $5 billion for that. So you can see the sort of potential that gaming world already has. Now, what it means for Pakistan, because I would like to sort of circle it back from fintechs to Pakistan, is we have a very big freelancer base over here, and these freelancers are working in tech. Now, these tech people need to position themselves that they are able to serve the demand of the future. For example, India did that 20 years ago, and you see India right now occupying the tech space globally. So we can take that head start now, get involved in Metaverse that is going to be around 10 trillion or 13 trillion. Some estimates are 10 trillion, some estimates are $13 trillion worth economy in itself in 10 years' time. So we can position ourselves better, we can regulate better. Fintechs are a necessity for Metaverse, and Metaverse is a very good option for fintechs to move into. That's a completely different venue, a different tangent to where we are, and holds immense value and business propositions for everyone concerned. So, that's what I would say.
Thank you, Tayseer. It sounds like there are lots of really exciting opportunities in fintech and transactions, almost as if the metaverse and the innovations in fintech are kind of converging onto some really neat opportunities which will create both opportunities and challenges in different ways. I'd like to shift to Furquan now and take the angle that He's with a startup and a venture that is very consumer focused, the Y.pk. And I'd love to hear from him both sides of the coin. That how do you see companies interacting with consumers through the metaverse? And by the same token, how do you see consumers getting involved in the metaverse? Now, it's very complex to reach consumers, and it's very complex for consumers to figure out what they want. Does the metaverse change that? Does it make it better? From his vantage point, what are things looking like? So go ahead, Furquan.
Great, thanks. So I think there are a very interesting question around do consumers need that, right? I think there are two aspects to things. One is consumers need something, and you try to make it as frictionless as possible, right? I think if you look at the global technology space, generally speaking, be it social network, be it e-commerce, and if you go back 25, 30 years in time, was there a need? No one would have said, I can do certain thing better, right? No one would have thought, oh, I need a car to go from one place to another 100 years ago. It just so happened, there was innovation that happened, and it actually hit the nerve where people said, you know what, wow, that makes my life easier. So I think first aspect is that. Now, the reality is, and I think probably not in our generation, for like 10, 15, 20 years, as the world goes by, there's increasingly more usage of technologies, I would say, that's pretty much driven by mobile of people now, by people. Now, what people do today with mobile, they certainly would like to do a lot more with that, right? So now, for example, if we take now, let's take the example of retail particularly. If you want to buy something today, what do? Either you go online, you look at something, you just check out and buy and hope it's going to get delivered. Now, if from statistically, in the garments and textile world, there's a very high return rate of people buying clothing online, for example. And the research done by Accenture about, I think, 2-3 years ago, 70% of those return rates were driven by the fact that the size did not match, or people felt it doesn't like suit them the way they thought it would look at it. Now, can that be improved with Metaverse? Certainly. Can there be augmented reality where people, when shopping online, they can actually see either through the meta twin or whatever, that avatar which looks like them, they can feel they've tried that shirt on. And so the return rate of that is going to drastically come down, right? That's one aspect. Can you actually see that size medium fits me or not, right? Can the thing that the metaverse, certainly if you are online with certain cameras around, and this all, you see, this is the technologies that need to be developed. And I think there's a question which is coming about startups, like I want to link it that how people should think about for getting into this space, right? If there's enough, and I think smart technology out there on my laptop, on my mobile phone, which can actually measure me and put a shirt on me, and I can try virtually, oh, look, the shirt looks good on me, I think I'm less likely to return that aspect. So I think that will make the friction increasingly lesser. I am more likely to buy from that particular brand which is doing that, because it just makes my life a lot more easier. I think I think similar use cases could be done not just in retail, but in I think a lot more of industries. Healthcare is something that I know a bit more about. I think a lot of people right now, if you take the example of Kidwai, right? People they come onto our app, and they come in thousands, and they actually just place an order. And they're hoping we'll deliver to them in time. Some we do, some we don't, right? Now people are just living in dark. And there's no way for us right now, other than calling them up, sending SMS, them calling us. And it's like a very typical traditional way. Will Chen and his friends and people who are 5 years younger than him would like that? Certainly, no. I don't like anyone calling me and saying, sir, your order is being shipped right now. I said, just text me. So I think the next generation wouldn't even want to have the text, right? Now, this made me think just right now about my own business, right? Is it possible that when you are coming to actually buy medicines from us, there's actually a pharmacy on your mobile, and you feel like you went to a pharmacist at the back, the pharmacist reads your prescription, dispenses things, and it actually shows that it's been dispensed and it's been packed and is given to the rider, right, for delivery. At least that aspect is now clear. My thing has been done. We don't have the technology to do so, right? But that's certainly one way where you are more likely to shop from us than anywhere else, because you'll feel, it's literally a very similar experience to me walking into a normal pharmacy out here, buying and coming out, right? Similarly, if I'm going for a physiotherapy session, I know the world's best physiotherapist, for example, for shoulder, is actually in Tennessee in the US, right? I'm here, what do? Whether I travel all the way or I get the guy come over, right? If I can actually be in my own bed with cameras around me and that person, the therapist, are actually in front and saying, turn your shoulder like this, turn this way. And then at the end of it, I may not feel any difference because the reality is anatomy is not going to just change because of metaverse or AR or VR for that. But the cameras tell me at the end of the session, your injury actually is improved by 3%. I may not notice that. 3% is not going to make any difference. But when I find out in that session with the world's best expert from a house in Gulberg, that actually, I didn't have to travel, I saved money, and my thing has improved 3%. So I need 5 more sessions. By the end of it, I'll go. I'm more likely to come back again. And I think those are the real experiences which needs to be worked on. And I think that's where the meta and verse is going to sort of evolve to, where the difference between digital and physical is going to get increasingly murkier. I think and given that happens, there'll be more users, be it consumers, businesses, enterprises, whatever. And when that happens, there'll be a transaction that needs to happen. So Tayseer's world is going to come into play, that there need to be a way where we can transact and pay this guy who's doing therapy for me from Tennessee, should be able to get money then and there into his account. And at that stage, when so many of these things are happening, Moneeza will come in and make sure that the regulatory framework exists because no one is stealing money from somebody else. So that's how it ties in. But the first stage is, are we developing the technologies for that? That's where the startups come in. And once the technologies are developed and they actually make lives easier, Meta is going to take off. I think this is all futuristic. It feels like very Star Wars. I think many things we see today felt like Star Wars, right? I think 10 years ago. So I don't think the reality it will be any different from this. Will we see in our lifetime? More likely than not, yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Furquan. I think your points about the different use cases, reducing friction, reducing return rates, they're all very fascinating, and you really thought through kind of the steps involved, from the technology to the regulations to the use cases involved. But based on all that, I want to take a step back and start thinking about this from the learning perspective. So I'm going to give an opportunity to Chen here. I want to hear from him. You're a student, you're at the cusp of your career, you hear a lot about the metaverse. You're thinking about, what am I going to study? It sounds like you're interested in science, you're interested in economics and business. But from a student perspective, how is the metaverse significant to your journey ahead? Do you see yourself working in the metaverse? What are your questions about the metaverse? What are your fears? How do you think it will impact the years for you ahead? So we'd love to hear from you, Chen.
Thank you, Mr. Jazib. So on my perspective as a student, I firstly really concerned about that how metaverse will really interact with us in the future, especially in the sphere of education. And when we think about that, we really want to look in at how does the education of the status quo changes after the metaverse comes in, right? So, for example, the two main areas that we might be concerned about are the curriculums and facilities. How will the facilities and the curriculum changes after the metaverse comes in, right? Actually, we do have a direct image of how that looks like. When the COVID actually started, I believe most of the teachers in Beacon House and TNS have a big crush on them because they started to force themselves to adapt into the online teaching module, which is the Google Classroom, which is the Zoom meetings, right? So that is basically how internet walks into our education. It changes our curriculum, it changes our facility, right? But when metaverse comes in, it's a different change, right? How will we expect that change? So I believe many of you guys might have heard about the Metaverse classroom, right? It's something more immersive. It's just like a Zoom classroom meeting, but then you can be a real character in the Metaverse classroom, and the whole teaching is more immersive. You can have students from all across the world, and you can actually interact with them in this kind of parallel world, right? And actually, on the other hand, as a STEM student myself, I'm more interested in how Metaverse will perhaps help me to better understand the concept of STEM, because you see that in Metaverse, it's more easy for you to build up these kind of science modules and actually help you to better observe this kind of science knowledges. And I believe when the Metaverse comes in, it's more helpful for you students to actually understand these kind of STEM concepts. For example, a concept and topic in physics might take us a month to study, but then maybe in the introduction of the metaverse, it will reduce the teaching time perhaps to half a month, right? So that might be something we'll be looking for.
Okay. Thank you, Chen. It's really exciting to hear that students are thinking about how the metaverse will impact them and kind of planning ahead to think about how it might affect the way they learn and how they plan out their education. So I'd like to kind of make that question a little broader to make it relevant to all our panelists. We're all lifelong learners, and the metaverse is just about starting. There are a lot of things we need to learn about it. There are lots of unanswered questions. And I'd like to hear from the rest of our panel, thinking from a student and learning perspective, what's exciting to you about the metaverse from the point of view of unanswered questions? What do you want to research? What should academia be looking at that makes you feel the metaverse can be made more productive? And I'd like to maybe give Moneeza the opportunity to share with her thoughts about what are the unanswered questions of the metaverse and what she'd like to explore.
Yes, so Jazib, when I started off, I remember with KPMG, we used to have these, big, huge box files that we used to put all our documentation into and used to file over there. And then now, if you see our files, it's all paperless. We've moved to a paperless environment. Our auditing software is all automated and all. So we've come a long way, and now we talk about the metaverse. Imagine, so where we are going, ahead. But as Furquan, I think, said, not in our lifetime, maybe in the next generation. And they also call it the next generation of internet, basically. But what is required is a universal world which is interconnected with each other like the internet. So till that does not happen, I think the metaverse will not take off. And I feel like, from my profession, yes, it's going to be exciting in the future, because when you are connected, because we have offices in 42 different countries of the world, and we have a lot of global clients who are located at different locations. So in the metaverse, imagine if you're all connected in an online, real-time, virtual world. So that is something that would really be very, ambitious, I would say, but at the same time very exciting. So this is something that I would really look forward to, and I hope I am there to see it.
Thank you so much, Moneeza. And I'd like to hear Farid's perspective as well, because he's kind of scouring the market and seeing what are the exciting new opportunities. I'd love to hear from him, what is he seeing at the academic research level, or what he thinks should be researched, so that we can kind of expand our understanding and application of the metaverse. So Farid, we'd love to hear from you in that context.
Thanks so much. I think the most exciting thing that's happening right now in the research arena when it comes to metaverse is, and I'm going to specifically talk about Web3 as one particular stack of the metaverse, which is for the open metaverse. So I talked about closed metaverses, for example, like Roblox, which are, I say it's a closed metaverse because it's owned by one country, it's a company, it's centralized, it's not open quite in the way that a lot of futurists think of the metaverse being open in the going forward. So if I think about Web3 and I think about this particular kind of organization that's emerged, and I'd love, if there's any one thing I'd love for all of you to walk away with today, is understanding what a DAO is. A DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. And the best simplified explanation I can give you of that organization is, think of it as a Facebook group with a bank account and governance rights, allowing people to vote for things. So now, if you fast forward and you think about research, what are traditionally people that have decided or commissioned research or backed? So for example, I went to the University of Toronto. I was doing, for my thesis, I was studying biofuels and next generation feedstocks, which means using particular things to generate methane and then using methane to power something. Now, who decided that that was going to be researched? Somebody did. Either it's industry paying for it, or it's a sponsor, somebody who's a commissioner. Now, in the future, what we'd love to see is more obscure research, possibly, which could have big impact. And the best example would probably be Moderna and the whole mRNA thing, right? It wasn't like this is new. It had been around for a while. It just got used in a particular way and it changed the world. Now, in research, there is a particular DAO that has emerged. And I want you all to, when you get a chance, look at something called Molecule DAO. And what they're doing is they're allowing participants in the DAO, and participants can be any one of us who decide to participate in that, to actually back particular projects and research on longevity, on various things. So if you're a student and if you're studying and if you are, or if you're conducting research, how powerful is that? That suddenly you can leverage a global crowd to back your research. So I think for me, it's about enablement and making sure that you have access to capital, because it's so important. I mean, very little is possible without capital, right? And while a lot of research organizations have money, if you want to do research outside of the confines of the centralized thinking, it's very difficult. So this is allowing for that to open. Almost think of it as a Web3 version of Kickstarter just for research and development. So that's my, I guess that's just a penny for your thoughts around research and the opportunity there when it comes to the metaverse and Web3.
Thank you so much, Farid, for kind of bringing us into some of the technicalities that you're looking at from the perspective of an investor. We're getting some great questions from the audience, and I'm going to be sharing some of those with our panelists. So one of the questions is, how ready is Pakistan for the meta economy? And I think we can look at this a little more broadly in terms of what conversations are really happening on the ground for people working in startups in Pakistan, thinking about the metaverse. Are people aware of it? What opportunities are they looking at? Is the ecosystem ready for it? So I think this is something we can get input from both Tayseer and Furquan on. So why don't we start with Tayseer?
So, yes, the answer, can you guys hear me? Is mic on? Hello? Okay. So, how ready is Pakistan? Well, the answer is yes, it's very ready. No, it's not ready at all. Yes, it's very ready because we have the right set of people working on it. We have one of the largest freelancer markets in Pakistan. These freelancers predominantly work in the tech industry. So they are very relative and they are very up to date with what's happening in the industry and what's happening in the world, number one. Secondly, from a Pakistani perspective, these tech guys are a source of revenue for us. So dollars coming in, and everyone knows about the Pakistani economic situation right now. For me as a startup, we have a lot of young people working for us, and every single person of them is extremely interested in Bitcoin. We have a full-fledged channel on our workboard where all which is discussed is Bitcoin and how the cryptos are performing. So Pakistan, with its young population, which happens to be around 55% of the population happens to be young, is very ready to adopt to, serve the meta economy and the metaverse. However, where we are lacking, where I say no, we are not ready at all, that's the regulatory bit. We haven't been able to decipher what meta economy, metaverse, and cryptocurrency would mean for us as a country. And that's where we are lagging. Just to give you some more perspective on it, all the third world countries, because of the way their rupee or their currency depreciates, so if you look at Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, these are the countries which have invested highly in cryptocurrencies as well. So one of the top cryptocurrency investors happen to be from these third world countries. So individually, collectively, we are extremely ready to adopt to and serve this new genre of economy that we are building, which is parallel to this real world. But from a regulatory perspective, no, we are not ready for that. There's one thing I want to add is as far as learning is concerned and your previous question. So what it has done is that it has prompted our younger population, a younger generation to learn about meta economy. I'm really happy that Beacon House took this initiative and introduced this conversation topic in this conference that they are holding. Unfortunately, I haven't seen this topic being discussed elsewhere or in other schools. And this is something that we need to be cognizant of, and we should introduce this discussion at a greater length with a greater audience.
Thank you so much, Tayseer. And I'd love to hear from Furquan as well on what are the conversations about metaverse on the ground and how prepared he sees Pakistan for it, or what Pakistan needs to do.
Thanks, Jazib. So I'll take the liberty to be a little controversial here, right? I think Pakistan as a country is not ready for most things, frankly speaking, right? And this pretty much is reflected in the fact that the mess we are in around the world, right? Now, do we have enough consumers to be using metaverse? Surely there are. WhatsApp was built somewhere much further away from here. Everyone across the economic strata is using it, right? They can't live without that. WhatsApp goes down, the world shuts down literally in Pakistan. Will WhatsApp start charging 50 cents tomorrow? All of us will be paying, right? No matter what economic strata we come from. We will be the best consumer economy for that, shipping out money from here, right? So that's one part. Pakistan is ready to use. Yes, we are ready to be consumers like we are, which only takes the country down because we don't produce anything, right? So now, are we ready? Where is the opportunity for Pakistan? Let's be positive about things, right? Where's the opportunity for Pakistan in the metaverse, right? It is a very evolving field, metaverse, right? The use cases are yet to be evolved. What we spoke about earlier are hypothetical things which may or may not happen, but more likely to happen than not, right? Now, can we be, and here's a chance, right? We can't be inventors of internet. Can we be a major inventor? I think is a bit too far. Can we actually major contributor to the metaverse, right? Or the meta world by being builders, by actually building things which will be a significant part of the meta economy going forward? If we think that meta is going to the future, which I think we all tend to agree that it is going to be, then can Pakistan as a country be a significant contributor? And the only way to do that is actually to something like what Beacon House is doing right now with the younger people like Chen and his friends, to be able to educate the younger lot to be able to think through. We don't need software developers. We were having this conversation earlier on with Tayseer, and I know it's not a very popular thing to say. We don't necessarily need software developers, right? Software development is like being a mechanic now at this stage. Everyone can become, as coding is becoming, there's a no code is a big movement where people can actually write software without actually coding it out. You need people who actually understand the science, who understand the logic, they understand the math behind it. And I think that can't be taught much later in life. That education system needs to be such that people, the kids are learning to think through stuff. Can they break a big problem into small problems and then solve step by step, rather than getting overwhelmed by, oh, okay, how can I build this whole, right? How about thinking about what is the first brick is going to look like? Can I actually make that first brick? And that thinking process needs to be inculcated at the very, very early stages of the education system. I think if someone is to really think about Pakistan's contribution to the meta economy, I think we are not ready. There's an opportunity to be ready about it. And I think that's the role where the education system can play to develop that younger audience. The next 4, 5, 6 years, when they go to university, they're able to think. And when they, whatever they study, they actually can start thinking about the applications and developing those things, be it biology, chemistry, computer science, building new computers, building new chips for those. That I think is an opportunity. Otherwise, we'll just be consumer. Yes, if metaverse becomes a reality tomorrow, all of us will be consuming, no doubt about that, right?
Thank you so much, Furquan. I think you really made us think through some of the building blocks that go into understanding the metaverse. Another question we have from the audience: will the metaverse increase employability? And how will the future workforce prepare itself for it? So this is kind of taking a macro picture on how it affects the economy. And I'd love to give a chance to anyone who'd like to take a stab at it, anyone who has some thoughts they'd like to share on our panel.
So I just want to add one thing over here, that please know that the jobs of the future that Metaverse would create, we don't even know about that right now. That is the big mystery that we have. The sort of jobs Metaverse will have for us, we're not even preparing ourselves for that, number one, and we don't even know about that. Those jobs do not exist right now. That's the big mystery, and we will all find it out on this journey that we are on discovering what Metaverse is. Whether we'll have increased employability, that's another question that we'll find out once we get to that point. Maybe some of our jobs will become redundant. I'm a CFO of Sada Bay. I don't know, maybe they don't need a CFO in the future unless the AI can make those decisions for them. That is something that needs to be discovered. Do we need doctors in the future? Because if an AI program can carry out a surgery, do we really need that? So we don't know that. And this is something that we need to start thinking about, where the extent lies. But unfortunately, in my opinion, right now, we simply cannot identify where it's going to end or what the possibilities could be.
Thank you.
I think I'd love to very quickly just talk about the opportunity now. And I think for Pakistan now, there is a huge opportunity. The entire metaverse is underpinned by something that we call the creator economy. And I think other panelists have already talked about the fact that we are great consumers. I think that Pakistanis can also be incredible creators. Now, I said could be, it's underpinned by the need for education around certain things. Now, some of those things include, for example, teaching people how to code, not just code on particular stacks, but if I were to take Roblox, which they paid out $500 million in 2021 to their creators. So that means people that were going into Roblox, creating games, and then allowing other players to come in and play those games were making $500 million last year. Now, I have spoken to some of those kids who are 14, 15, 16 years old that have made more than $500,000 each. It's incredible. So why couldn't those kids be in Pakistan? They 100% could be. But the biggest problem and challenge, I think, or the gap is the understanding or the ability for educational institutions to prepare those kids for the jobs of today, forget tomorrow. So, like, can you teach kids, for example, how to design for Roblox or any other metaverse that exists? Can you teach them how to code in Lua, which is the programming language that's specific to Roblox? And guys, I'm not paid by Roblox, but I use it as an example because my kids use it a lot. And I end up paying a lot of money to my kids who want to buy those little tokens called Robux to play in it. So it's just food for thought for the rest of the audience and also for the educators who are listening and watching this, which is, why don't we grab the bull by the horn? Why don't we start to create groups of people? And I know that Jazib, you have Tintash is an amazing example of what is possible in Pakistan. You guys have made an incredible gaming organization, but how can we make 4,000 Tintashes in Pakistan? We've got to dream bigger, right? And I think that that's what's missing. But hopefully, platforms like what you're doing today will allow us to open up our minds, think about this, and hopefully, when people go back home, they're like, okay, how difficult is it for me to create something on Roblox or any of these other environments? What do I have to learn? What skills do I need? And the biggest fallacy in this whole space is that you have to be technical to actually be successful in it. You do not. You can absolutely hire technical people. You could design the game. You could write the copy for a game. You could write. So I'm not saying that everything has to do with a game, but I'm just giving you a specific use case, which is big, it's large, it's growing, and therefore Pakistanis could jump on that bandwagon and, as a fantastic community of freelancers, service a lot of what's going on both outside the world and hopefully eventually in Pakistan too. So just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much, Farid.
And Jazib, if I could add regarding the employability, I have my 2 cents on it. What I feel basically is, like, as long as there are humans in this world, I feel that necessity is the mother of invention, right? The jobs may not exist in the nature and form that they are doing right now, but they will evolve basically. So to say that, their jobs will not be there, I think that's not a right aspect, because we've come such a long way from, like, where we started and where we are right now. So I feel like, the jobs will evolve, and it's not about employability. The people will start thinking on different terms, and different employment opportunities will arise then. So this is what I feel.
That's exactly the optimistic note I'd like to bring us to a conclusion on. On behalf of Beacon House, I want to thank Farid, I want to thank Furquan, Tayseer, Moneeza, Chen. They've all been wonderful panelists here. I want to thank everyone in our audience for participating in the SOT Edition 15, Guardians of the Future. Please do share your feedback. You'll be receiving an email about that. Do visit the exclusive art and tech exhibits you might have seen outside. There are lots of immersive, great experiences out there. And we do want to thank our lead sponsor, UBL, for its continued support. I also want to remind you, lots of other great sessions today and tomorrow. Please do attend them in whatever form you can, especially lots of sessions related to EdTech and even the Metaverse. You'll find lots of very similar panels sharing different perspectives. And my final note is really, I'm glad we could bring together lots of different perspectives, and hopefully you've got some idea of what the hype about the Metaverse is all about, and more importantly, you feel better qualified to pass your opinion on it and think about how it matters to your life. And once again, thank you to everyone here. Thank you to our panelists. All the best.